Welcome to a session at the end of the day on e-government where we're going to solve all of the problems of government. I must say that the E has struck me here as interesting, whether we're talking about e-services, e-democracy, e-commerce, e-management. I want to remind everybody that we're 171 days from November 8th, the election. And so in the last few weeks, I've been thinking that the E stands for the end of the republic as we know it. That's not really a partisan comment. Okay, so we have an amazing panel. Let us just go right down the panel here and do quick introductions, and then I'll come back to each of them to have a set piece on what great things they're doing in the space. Jonathan.
Terrific to be here. Jonathan Reichental. I am the Chief Information Officer / Chief Technology Officer for the city of Palo Alto. So I'm home here.
Colleen Chien. I'm a professor at Santa Clara University School of Law, and I've worked in the federal government for about 15 months at the White House, and I think I'm here in that capacity.
Hi, I'm Peter Parycek from Austria. I'm professor for e-governance at Danube University, Krems.
My name is Montoya Tansey, and I'm with Code for America. I lead our safety and justice vertical, and I also spent a while with the federal government.
Great. So what we're going to do is, I'm going to do very light lifting duty, I hope. I'm going to ask each of our panelists, going Jonathan first, and then I'll call on Colleen, and then Jenny, and then Peter, going from the local, which is Palo Alto, to the international, in terms of government, where Peter lives, to talk about what we're doing in the space and how are we delivering government services to the citizenry of, at a local level, at a state level, at the national level, the federal government, where we have, some of us have experience. Maybe I should say also, just for a second, I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself, Jason Barron. I spent 33 years in the government. I was director of litigation at the National Archives until October 1st, 2013, when the government shut down and all the lawyers at the National Archives were declared to be non-essential and sent home. And it was a blow to my ego, and so I quit. So, okay. So with that, let's have a conversation, a series of set pieces about where we are in the space, and then we're going to try to figure out what are continuities in terms of challenges and obstacles to progress. So, and maybe hope in the future. So, Jonathan.
Great. You know, my presence here feels like the start of a joke. A computer science guy talks about government at a law conference. You know, ... what happens? But I'm thrilled to be here. It's always a privilege to do what I do and to have the opportunity to speak to groups like this and work with the community of Palo Alto. So, you know, as a CIO, technology guy, my job is sort of split into two pieces. One is just your typical day-to-day IT stuff, running a data center, making sure the email works, making sure people's computers work. And actually, I could stop there. I mean, that really is my role. But, you know, I've chosen to do something a little different as, you know, our council and our city manager wants me to, and that is to figure out how we can move the ball forward and basically reinvent government here on the platform of the city of Palo Alto, where so much of the world is reinvented and innovation is inspired from here. So where does that all come from? There's a couple of sort of motivations. Number one is we now are an urban planet. So half the world, about 54% of the planet, about 3.7 billion people live in cities. And, you know, just to kind of give you a sense of the speed at which we're becoming urbanized, we are moving into cities at about 3 million people per week, according to United Nations. And my thesis is our cities are woefully unprepared. Here in the United States, and I get the privilege to travel a little bit around the world, we're not really ready for the needs of society right now and the increasing needs going forward. You know, what are those needs? Well, they're obvious to anyone who lives in a city. You know, the most apparent and in-your-face sort of weakness we have is transportation. And here in Silicon Valley in particular, if it takes you 1 hour to go 10 miles, and often it does for me, you should be really annoyed by that and frustrated and figure out and try to work together to figure that out. And so I come from the perspective of technology is going to have a big role in this. And what can I do in my role and my team and our city do to collaborate and co-create with the community and the region and tech companies to change that paradigm. And so we look at transportation, we look at the future of energy and our upcoming transition probably to solar in a very big way that totally changes the game when we move away from carbon in so many ways. We have to look at just generally our infrastructure. You know, when you think about, for example, the upcoming emergence of self-driving cars, you know, if self-driving car, if all the predictions come true, and I'm a big believer they will, and they'll happen sooner than we think, cars will be driving themselves in a reasonable way in 10 years and 20 years for sure. I do think it will be illegal for humans to drive cars in probably about 30 years, maybe sooner. And no, I mean that. And so if cars don't need traffic signals, cars don't need stop signs, and cars, kind of interoperate and talk to each other, you can design cities completely differently. So the emergence of some of this technology is going to change the very nature of the design and look and feel and behavior of cities. Real quick, as I wrap up my comments, so what have we been doing? And hopefully I'll get a chance to do a bit of that. We set out to be a leading digital city in America about 4 years ago. And about 2 years ago, the Center for Digital Innovation, or digital government in Sacramento, named us the #1 digital city of our size in the country. I was pretty proud of that. And that just means we're champions. Doesn't mean we've achieved nirvana. We've got a lot of work to do. It means that we're on the right path, and we're converting a lot of our services to a digital platform. But something has happened now in the last sort of 18 to 24 months, and that is it's much more than just digital. It's physical too. We have to change the physical world in which we live so that cities work better. So you merge the digital with the physical, and you get what's called smarter, connected cities. And that's what we're focused on right now. So I'll stop there.
Great. Colleen?
Great. So today we've had a lot of discussion about technology and the law in the future. What we've had a little less of, however, is a discussion of some of the human stories that motivate, I think, and are behind a lot of what we've talked about today. You know, whether it is the desire to create a fair, more effective, and transparent criminal justice system, to reduce the cost of legal services, or to improve policing outcomes. So in my few minutes, I'm just going to give one story that I think conveys some of the perils and the promise of government technology. So I don't know if those slides actually got loaded or not.
They did not.
Did not? Okay, so that's fine. So just use your imagination.
Oh, sorry, no.
Check that out.
The story that I'm going to tell is not on the slides, but it begins when I started my job at the White House in the fall of 2013. I just turned 40, and I was really excited about starting a job in D.C. I had not worked there in many years. I had never worked for the federal government, but I had the privilege of being offered a position at the Office of Science and Technology Policy, so that's the OSTP, in the Office of the Chief Technology Officer. And I'm a patent policy geek, which is one reason I'm here talking about my federal government experience, but typically, most of the time, my professional life, I've been working on patent policy. And this is something the president had gotten interested in, so I was able to make it over to DC. So soon after I got there, I had a meeting with my boss, who was the CTO at the time, Todd Park. And he had started a couple companies that went public. He was my age, but he was this kind of second chief technology officer of the United States, and he had this habit of just saying awesome all the time and just being a very inspirational person to work for. So in this first meeting, he said to me, "This is an awesome job." He said, "This is also a really hard job, and don't worry about it. We will meet every week for a while to help you get your sea legs." That's the expression in federal government for helping you get acclimated to the work environment. Two of those statements ended up being true, but one turned out to be a lie. Working at the White House was awesome. It was also really hard, but I basically never had another one-to-one with Todd. Because soon after I started, the countdown to the healthcare.gov website launch started. And this was something that Todd, as the Chief Technology Officer of the United States, had to help out on because he had previously done work at HHS. And so to do that job, he had to cancel a schedule, including meeting with me. Soon after the website launched, as we all know, it failed, and people did not sign up. And the website still did not work, and people did not sign up. But line by line of code, Todd Park and others in the administration worked for days and nights, many times without any break, recruiting a team of engineers from Silicon Valley and creating a ragtag surge team to rescue the website. It got rescued not because of the technology, but because of the people. And here I would show my slide, which shows a picture of 20-something woman named Haley Van Dyke, an amazing person who works in the administration and is one of the key reasons that the digital services team now is in place there. And she just gave a TED Talk in February. Some of you were probably there. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend you look at it immediately. It's a wonderful talk. And I think really brings together this idea of the talent and cross-pollination of the spirit of Silicon Valley that we're right here in right now with DC. Now, the fights in politics continued. We lost the Senate, but the website worked, and it worked. And the entire legacy of the president was vindicated because the website worked. And what this did, I think, is create exposure to the problems of outdated government IT, the ones we've talked about, using Internet Explorer 8, using government token keys to access information when you're off-site, which was extremely difficult and cumbersome. Every person, as they enter the White House, for a long time has had to spend hours on the phone with IT trying to figure out how to do the remote login, and it's something that's just a rite of passage. Eventually you just get so frustrated, but now they've actually done a lot to reform it. But exposing these problems, I think, to the public allowed the federal government and its problems, which are really, if you think about it, all of our problems, right? We all have to use the DMV website at some point. We've got to file our taxes. We all have to interact with government websites. But to connect those problems and the problems with government websites to technologists and their solutions and deepen that partnership. They say never waste a good crisis, and the technologists and the administration didn't. Because after the healthcare.gov disaster, there became to be a more steady pipeline of talent, of people with experience in Silicon Valley and technologists in other places into the government. And this was following an effort that Jenny Tansey's boss at Code for America, Jen Paulka, had started this idea in the private sector, in the non-for-profit sector, then brought into the government and bringing this pipeline of talent in. Because as it turned out, many of the websites in the federal government were on the verge of crisis. Remembering the VA, attention to the VA website with VA veterans not being able to get their benefits on time, thinking about the millions of undocumented or not citizen-eligible individuals in the country who don't apply for citizenship because the website is very challenging. What's been really inspiring for me or during my time there is working with young people whose most exciting thing to be working on is trying to fix these problems. And I'll leave, I think, this discussion with one vignette as well about the information, I think the promise that this effort illustrates in terms of getting that talent to the problems. And that is the kind of story of Mikey Dickerson, who also is with U.S. Digital Services, was a top engineer at Google. And he said when he thought about whether or not to actually enter the government fully, he'd been there to help out with a surge, he had to think about what was his day going to look like and what was going to be the impact of what he was doing. And so when he was at Google, there was a choice he had to make about how to ultimately figure out how to get people to click on ads more, because ultimately that's what has to happen for people to monetize their websites. You contrast that with what he can do as part of the digital services, where he's fixing websites that deliver government services, especially to those who need it the most. And for him, the choice was very clear. And I think presented that way, for many people here who are working on the cutting edge of technology, who are kind of coming up with brilliant ideas, the choice could also be very clear. So I think for me, what I'd like to hear my co-panelists talk about more is how we get and expose the problems of government, which are all of our problems, and get them to be in front of those who have a lot of talent and get those people to be working on these problems.
Great. I'm going to go to Jenny and then Peter.
Cool. Okay, so let's see. I'm here to talk with you about Code for America, where I work. I actually lead our vertical in public safety and criminal justice, but since we just had a panel on criminal justice reform, I'm going to mostly talk about what we're doing around increasing access to the social safety net, and I'll throw in a little bit of criminal justice at the end. But for those of you who don't know Code for America, we're a 5-year-old nonprofit organization. We partner with community and with government, local and state government primarily, to build technology that solves social problems. And we've done a lot of work since 2013 on access to food stamps, or the SNAP program. I think 250,000 people apply for SNAP every day in the US. And annually, the USDA, where I used to work, I also served for some time in the Obama administration, they spend $8 billion a year providing food assistance. So it's a huge, huge market. And unfortunately, there are millions of people, particularly here in California, who are eligible for food assistance that don't get access to it. And we've been working on addressing that participation gap, particularly in California. Why is the participation rate so low? Well, partly this is why. So right now, to apply for SNAP in California, you have to answer over 100 questions on an online application that you can see here. There are 30 screens. There's like 5 steps to set up the account. And a lot of the questions are really confusingly phrased. It's just badly designed. Deeper, why does this website suck? This is a little tiny piece of one of the state automated welfare systems in California. If you go deeper down the stack, there's obviously a lot more to it. And at its deepest level, the databases that log information about who's enrolled in the program and benefits, that part actually works pretty well. And that's where all the money is. Accenture has been, responsible at least for a large chunk of that system for a long time, and it kind of degrades up the stack. There's different levels of good, and it gets really bad at the user interface. So we kind of asked what would happen if we started at the top of the stack and we used Agile and we used open source and we really focused maniacally just on meeting the user needs of low-income people who need help to buy food. And so this is how you apply. This is how you apply, let's see, with us. It's mobile first. It takes 10 minutes. Actually, I think, for whatever reason, PowerPoint doesn't want to scroll through the application. But, it's really simple. There's 10 questions. And this actually just populates that other crappy website that you saw. So you never have to look at that if you're applying, but then we drive the information into that other system. And then we follow up with you, which doesn't happen typically. We text you and we just follow you through the whole system, and we track and see, how's the process working for you. And we concierge it really heavily, and we're now investing heavily in automating it. But we get a lot of qualitative data as part of that tracking process. So these are responses to the question, just a simple question of, is there anything else we should know in our application? So one thing that's really nice about this process is that we have constant reminders about why people need SNAP. And then we also get a lot of quantitative data about the funnel, and where are people falling out, and what are the barriers, and what are the bottlenecks for people trying to access this program. And we can deliver that data, and we do deliver that data to all of our county partners. And that's actually, I think, where the really big value is for our government partners, because they don't really have this view around user experience of their program without our tool. So it helps us help them debug their operations. And a lot of the things that have changed since we started standing up this tool in California that have really helped unlock access to food have not really related to the technology. They've related to us discovering bugs in the business process at the county level that surface for the first time because we're tracking data on our users, and then letting county folks know who are alarmed and immediately change the process. So I think I'm really excited by that, this apps to ops strategy. And it's actually really kind of why I came to Code for America in the first place. I'm a policy person. And I've been lucky to see some big policy and legislative wins in my prior work. And then I saw, to use like an electrical metaphor, a lot of transmission loss when we tried to implement policy. The potential just didn't end up getting captured, and a lot of the reason why was the technology. In the 21st century, all policy implementation basically passes through technology, and when government technology sucks, then you don't get everything you could. So I work in public safety, and we're actually applying the SNAP, the food stamps play, to another process in criminal justice, which is expungement, or here in California, reclassification under Prop 47, which passed in 2014. Some of you may know it gives an opportunity for a lot of people with low-level felonies to reclassify them as misdemeanors. That's also a really difficult process to navigate for people. And actually, there's a lot of crossover between our users for our food stamp tool and folks with convictions in California. So this is our expungement tool. Right now, it works in San Francisco. So if any of you know anybody with a past conviction in San Francisco, you used to have to go to a clean slate legal clinic that was just open 2 hours a week at the public defender's office. Now you can do it online on your couch. So anyway, I think I'll stop there. There's some other work we're doing around reducing failures to appear in court with court reminders in Atlanta. Ultimately, this is how we're going to keep our democracy functioning well. So.
Great, thanks. So, Peter, from your perspective in the EU, tell us what your initiatives that you're most excited about.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe just one comment to the food stamp. I think the food stamp service was the first time mentioned in Al Gore infrastructure plan. I think it's more than 20 years ago to revolutionize that. So it took some years to bring that online. So I will give you some insight into the European development, which is at the moment quite interesting because the e-government action plan 2016-2020 was just released in April. And then I will also give you a short overview about the legal framework for electronic identities and electronic signatures. First of all, the e-government action plan. This is the policy paper for all member states. So that's not for the administration in Brussels. It's for the member states, for the 28 member states. And if you look to the main sentence, so what are the main goals of the paper? Then the goal is that by 2020, public administration, public institutions in the European Union should be open, efficient, inclusive, and providing borderless, personalized, user-friendly, end-to-end digital public services to all citizens, businesses in the EU. So we find a lot of buzzwords, e-government buzzwords in this sentence. So we find these buzzwords, I think, in the last 10, 20 years in all different e-government strategies. And we know that we didn't achieve all of them. If you look to the European, to one of the very, very much European goals is the borderless aspect. And the borderless aspect is very specific for the European Union because it's very hard to tackle that we build up cross-national public services because we have different cultures, we have different governance, we have different rule sets, and of course different technologies which are used from the different governments and administrations. So it's really a hard goal to achieve, and nevertheless, this borderless public service is one of the main goals of the European Commission. Also because of the digital single market, because this is one of the major goals in Europe. If you look to two terms, and this is very much also linked what Jenny just told us, is the personalized aspect and the user-friendly aspect. Because I think it's very hard for administration in general, for American and also for European and worldwide, to be successful. Because the first of one is that I do not know very many really user-friendly front-end solutions. And even if the administration is able to build up user-friendly front ends, they are very often not able to maintain them. So it's just a one-hit wonder, and then they are not able to maintain the front end. And especially in the mobile world, this is a huge problem, because as we know, mobile applications is an ongoing development, and you can't stop the development of a mobile application. The second one is the personalization aspect. It's very complicated because of data protection law and privacy. This is in Austria and Germany a big problem. In other countries in Europe not, because maybe you know that the difference in Europe is as big as in the United States. So there is not one data protection or privacy culture in Europe. So it's very, very different. So the northern countries have no problem with data protection. So they're very open, also in sharing their personal data. The third aspect, and I think this is the most difficult, is that the administration is not able to bundle services. What do I mean with bundle services? To bundle administrative procedures with business procedures. If you move from A to B, then you have a lot of administrative procedures, but also business procedures. And the administration will never, ever bundle these processes. If I'm a user, from a user's perspective, this is a lifetime event. It is a life, I don't know if this term is is it used? Live event?
Yeah.
Yeah, live event. So this is a live event, and I want to do it from one website with one service. And in regard to this problem, I think we have to move so that the next step for a government is to provide APIs. So wonderful APIs where you can data in and data out, because then e-government startups could bundle these services, fetch the data from the government, and pull back the data if everything is in the system. So that brings me forward to the second aspect, and the second aspect is the EIDAS regulation. That's the name. The EIDAS regulation is on a European level, and on a European level, we had the regulation for electronic signatures. Maybe this is known. Electronic signatures always have been a big deal in Europe, but very few countries were successful. This is Estonia. They are very successful in implementing electronic signatures and electronic identities. A little bit Austria, and that's it more or less. The aspect of electronic identification and electronic delivery was not regulated on the European level. That was regulated on national level, which leads to, as you can imagine, to several problems. So we developed national-based solutions, which we were not able to use in the next country. So this regulation tries to harmonize this on the legal aspect, and then we have a very complicated interoperability framework, and I'm not very optimistic that this technical interoperability framework will work in the future, but we will see. The interesting thing is that it has one interesting aspect in the regulation, so that if Austria is offering an EID system for Austria, then it also has to accept other EID solutions from other countries. And this opens up the possibility for government startups in the field of electronic identification. Because if they really are able to build a user-friendly solution, which is allowed in one country in Europe, then you can use it all over Europe. So this is quite interesting for the near future. And the other aspects which are connected to the electronic identification is how can we move electronic identity cards and driving licenses, for example, to smartphones. And this is an ongoing project which I'm involved, which is really, really interesting, and I'm absolutely in love with this project. And also related to this aspect is how can we use blockchain technology for electronic identification or electronic notary, and there are already some really interesting aspects. At the end of my short intro, I want to raise up, if you look to mobile applications, I would recommend UK at the moment. If you look to the most digitalized country, then it's Estonia. So, because they're doing a lot of projects in the field of blockchain technology, and also in the field of electronic identification, they are the leading country, and they are also doing internet elections. So, really, internet elections, 30% of the last poll, 30% of the last votes were done electronically from home. Thanks.
Great. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to pose a question. It's a two-part question, and each of you think about it while I then give myself 2 minutes to talk about why I came to Codex and what I'm trying to accomplish here. So the question for the panel is, what is holding e-government back in each of your spaces? What is or are the obstacles to progress in really coming to a transformative moment in the space that you're operating on? And where are the opportunities? So on the plus side, where do you see the future, the next 5 years, the opportunities being where we're going to have successes? Now, everybody think about that for a moment, and I will just say that my passion, which I've had for 40 years in government, really, is that we live in a world where public records are paradoxically all going digital, but are also becoming inaccessible. And so my challenge to the Codex community is to help the government, help us, help federal agencies, particularly the National Archives, but others, figure out a path to openness, not just today, but in the future. So not just Facebook and Twitter and interacting in that way with government agencies, but to actually open up billions of emails and other traditional records that are going to be inaccessible because they'll be in dark archives that will never be opened in any of our lifetime unless we use very sophisticated search tools and filter tools to get out personally identifiable information and otherwise. All of the public archives around the world are going dark. So we can all walk into a National Archives and get our records of our parents or grandparents fighting in World War II, whatever. They're in boxes. You can see them. But in a digital space, in an e-government space, the paradox is not so easy to do that in the year 2020, 2030, 2040. So with that, that's my challenge to the community. Now, obstacles and the journey towards success. I'll turn it to Jonathan, and then we can just go right down the panel.
Sure, thanks for that. So a quick, few quick thoughts. I grapple with just innovation in general in government, and one of the questions that I'm concerned about is, my peer group, my other CIOs in government. What are we going to do to sort of help them see innovation as lower risk than they perceive it to be? And the ultimate conclusion I've come to is we wait till they retire. Right?
That's true of all professions.
We really need a new generation of tech leaders entering government, and we actually see that, which is awesome. What's holding e-government back? By the way, I used to work in e-business, and it eventually just became business. So I think e-government is just government now. Ultimately, people want to interact with government by snail mail, by walking into City Hall. And they also want to work with government over smartphones. So we have to provide, services to the largest customer base you could imagine. So there are three things I just came up with real quick that are holding sort of the ability for us to provide a whole suite of services to communities via effectively a smartphone. One is just simply capacity. One of the things I deal with every single day is just an abundance of priorities. It makes the work really interesting because no day is ever boring. But there are lots of things to do, so just having the right talent available is a problem. I'll come to how we solve that in a moment. The next thing is that there's a number of perceptions that we have to overcome. First is that doing things remarkably different is highly risky. And secondly, for folks to enter this space, a vendor to compete in government, the perception is that it's not worth the time. It's much easier to sell social networking software to consumers. And the third piece, which kind of wraps us all into one package, is the genesis of absolutely everything, which is economics. It has to be actually worthwhile for people to participate in order to participate. And so right now, historically, it's hard for a startup in Silicon Valley to see government as a way that they can make money and make it quickly and make a lot of it. And we have to change that. We have to say that, yes, there is tons of things to do. Government is really poorly served by the tech industry. And once we sort of change that and people can make money, they will come and we will see a lot more innovation. So what are the ops? They're kind of the opposite of some of the things I just said. First of all, I totally agree with Jason here, which is we got to make all the data available. You know, one of the things that struck me coming from the private sector to the public sector is that we live and operate in a world of constraints. There's not enough money. There's too many things to do. There's not enough talent. But there is an abundance of data. It is the one thing we have in abundance, and it's also the one thing that we so seldom use and leverage. So I'm on a mission to unpackage and make available data in Palo Alto and then be a champion for opening up data across the country. Once we open up the data, that's what software engineers love. And they can build apps on top of it and hopefully make money doing that. And that creates an incentive, and there you got the economics. The last point about where are the opportunity to make it easier to sell into government, right? And so basically fix procurement, which Code for America is a great champion for, and others. We have to, I have the chance sitting at the heart, the center of Silicon Valley to meet with lots of startups, and they're just trying to be really diligent about their time and their money, and they can't respond to big RFPs, big requests for proposals. So we got to make that easy. We got to make them smaller, carve out some space for the startup community to contribute. I think there's progress, by the way, in all these things. So I'm actually a real optimist. These are tough problems to crack, really tough. But I've never seen sort of a better time and more potential for us overcoming these now in the next sort of 5 years and beyond.
Great. Colleen?
I have to echo most of what Jonathan said. I thought that was terrific. I also wrote down, in addition to a lot of the points he made about government procurement, a cultural issue around fear of failure, which was really gripping to see that in the federal government at the agency level, where people really do want to drive mission and create value for the public, but are also really afraid about what the consequences might be, not only around the red tape, but just in terms of figuring out if you're breaking with protocol, if you're going to get a backlash from the public, and just trying to create more safe spaces for experimentation and for trying things out in pilots, and creating more policy space as well as technology space for that to take place, I think is really important. And so taking some of the lessons from those successful experiments and trying to figure out how to scale those, I think is really important. I do think we have a moment now with a transition in the federal government with, again, we've talked a lot about local and state government. I still think on the federal agency level that trying to ensure that the talent that has come over during this administration gets embedded and stays there, and I've heard some optimistic points on that front, but I think having a president who's really pro-technology, really likes it, has made a huge difference, gives as much freedom and kind of allows some of the fear to be dissipated because the guy in charge is supportive of this type of work. That's going to be really important in the next administration. So I think that is also an outstanding challenge.
Before Jenny and Peter toss the coin to see who goes next, everybody here is welcome to come to the microphones at the end of this round of questions and express your frustration about government. So, okay. Jenny, Peter, either one.
Peter? Okay. It was already mentioned, maybe the cultural aspect. I absolutely agree to the aspects which already have been mentioned. But the cultural aspect is really a huge problem. There was a nice study from Stanford Burns from the Kennedy School just from 2014, and he looked what are the problems with innovation projects. So not in regard to e-government project, but e-government is nothing else than innovation project. So he looked to innovation projects and he found out that 50% of the obstacles were internal. So phantom rules and procedures, unwritten rules and conventions, unexercised discretion. So, and based also on my experience, I also worked in the federal chancellery for 6 years. It's also the silo mentality. So it's the huge organizations, the departments, they do not work and collaborate together. So we often force them and ask them to participate with NGOs and with the society. But how should they do that if they are not able to participate, to collaborate in their internal sphere? So I think this is also a big problem. And of course, sometimes the legal framework is a problem for innovation. So I think this is so not a technical problems, but more the cultural and organizational and legal framework within the organizations. If we look to the future of e-government is very often seen as the digitalization of processes and to do some public services on a digital basis. If I look to e-government today, I would more say it's a completely digital transformation of the whole organization. So therefore, you need a very clear strategy, which is very often missing, and you need a very clear digital leadership, a strong leadership, as you mentioned, that the president is absolutely behind the strategy, and he forces the strategy and supports the strategy. So a very clear digital leadership and then to force the departments to do the collaboration. And if you look to the open data, then here we see very similar results, because some departments, they publish the data, and some departments say, we have no data. All of us know they have the data, but if they do not publish it, it's very difficult to free the data. So it's very much also to convince the people in the departments that the change and the collaboration and the publishing of data makes sense for them. So it's also the question of how can we convince them, and how can we convince them to do that?
Cool. Okay, well, everyone has said a lot of the things that I agree with. I'll just add a little bit to say on the talent piece is super vital. In addition to bringing more technologists into government, I'll just add, I think there's a lot of just leveling up of people within government that can be done. Not necessarily, I mean, it could mean teaching people how to make a thing, but it could also mean just that. I think right now there exists a certain sense that, you know, if you're looking to move up into executive leadership in government, you need to know how to manage a budget. But there's not necessarily a sense that everybody who's like looking to move up into government leadership needs to know how to manage technical people and manage technology and be really, you know, feel comfortable with how that works in the modern world. And I think that is, we have a great fellowship program that brings technologists into government, but I'd actually love to bring more government leaders into technology spaces for a short time and then, you know, send them back. I think that would also really help. And then on procurement, definitely agree. I think some positive things have been happening. You know, one which Code for America was lucky to be involved in, spearheading some work on agile procurement for the state of California's new child welfare system that the U.S. Digital Service also pitched in on, that I think is really promising for the direction that the state is going here. And also in terms of our work with CalFresh, you know, we would really like to, we're going to bring that tool statewide. It will be serving millions of people in California, but what we would really love to do is be able to do it in such a way that we're getting paid for what we see as our goals, which is serving users, rather than being paid for a software product. Would like to be paid based on how many people are getting access to food assistance. And I think social impact bonds are, or some other performance-based, you know, work that's being done in government is interesting, and there could be potentially some corollaries in this space, but I think that's a direction I would love to see, you know, new procurement models being developed in. And then, and then obviously APIs would be great too. That's it.
Can I ask you, Jenny,
Yeah.
I think, you know, people seeing that awesome presentation you did might just ask, well, maybe the big problem is how can we scale Code for America? So I want to just, if you could address a little bit, why can't we just take that model, and what are the limitations on the scaling of that model and having that happen to every government service?
Well, if anyone has money, that's always helpful. But
what is the exactly, getting back to economics, what is the model there in terms of getting paid and, you know, from the agencies, or, you know, for the performance, these types of things?
Yeah, I think so. Well, we're excited. We just actually, California recently changed who is eligible for SNAP outreach dollars to include technology organizations. I would think largely so that we could be included in that, which we're really excited about, and that's what's going to allow us to scale statewide. There are a lot of other entitlement programs that have outreach-related revenue streams where that's potentially a hack too, I think. I don't know. I've been doing a lot of thinking about where those opportunities lie within criminal justice, particularly in like the justice services space. And I'm not done thinking about it, but I do feel like there's a lot of non-IT related money, either federal or state, that like people don't typically think about as a funding stream for this type of work that may possibly be actually more apt for us. And then I think, we've seen some promising movement in venture capital as well towards funding more GovTech startups, which is exciting as well.
We only have a few minutes left. A question, a brave soul, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, Aaron Wright, professor at Cardozo Law School. Jenny, I just wanted to say, I never saw that technology. You've given me hope that we can actually implement government technology, so I think that's wonderful. I think it's great. I really look forward to seeing more of that type of technology get developed. And then I wanted to add one comment and then a question. Talking about the age of our government workforce, just some stats. The millennials are over 50% of the workforce and 18% of the federal workers, so I think that kind of speaks a lot to kind of where government is and is really one of the fundamental things. And another question that I just had, I think, at least in my understanding of one of the limitations for e-government is identity systems, right? Really hard to authenticate that somebody is a citizen of a given, state, country, jurisdiction. And I was just kind of curious if, like the UN has a massive identity e-government conference today, which I was just following on Twitter, and I just was wondering if that was one of the limitations that you guys face.
Anyone want to take that? I know the shining example of identity in e-government is India, with a huge number, hundreds of millions of people now having at least being identified so that they can have benefits, whereas they haven't before. Anybody else want to say?
The banks have figured it out. So a couple of thoughts real quick. I mean, we do have authentication, clearly, right? We interact with tons of government sites and services all the time. I guess the one area that I'm interested in to help answer this question is, will we be able to do electronic voting in the United States anytime soon? I think that's a really big question. It'll be interesting to see how Estonia evolves, whether kind of they move away from a 4-year election cycle and just vote whenever there's something to vote about. Changes the nature of elected officials or representatives when you do that. So it has big implications. Even at the local level, though, as I look at the problem in the US, I mean, there's a lot of complexity to the way in which local elections are held. And it's not simply just a matter of authentication. There's a lot of tradition and a lot of other hurdles that have to be overcome. So I don't think it's imminent in the United States, to be honest with you. We're only a few years away from, hanging chads. Now we're potentially using electronic voting at the booth level. So moving that then to voting from your smartphone, I think, is a ways away. Somebody mentioned it, I think, in this or last panel, that this emergent blockchain technology, which effectively can be a way to authenticate in a very reliable way, is something I'm following. I think we're in the early stages of it. If it does, to turn out that this technology allows an almost foolproof, close to, way to validate a person's identity, I think that's game-changing. I think it does enable authentication across all systems and electronic voting. But I'm going to keep an open mind. I think we all should, and sort of continue to watch the technology evolve. I think it's very fascinating.
I have, Peter asked one question that I can't help but asking him. He posed it to me to ask him, and will we ever see a U.S. Congress or a parliament passing programmed code and self-executing laws? So, Peter, what do you say?
Oh, I did. I was the first time at Codex last year, and the last panel discussed about self-executing contracts. And I was so fascinated from the self-executing contracts concept that I talked to a lot of people in Austria, and also to my mentor. He's Friedrich Lachmeier. He is the Austrian visionary for legal informatics. And he said to me, "Oh, Peter, this is not to program a contract. That's easy. You have to look at programming law." Because then we would have solved all the computation problems which we have if you transform text into code. So, and that fascinated me, and I'm thinking about how we can set up the first project in this field. It's more a long-term goal, but maybe we will see before we die that the Parliament or the Congress will pass a code, and the text. So the code is the authentic source, and the text is just a document. It's just a documentation for us, the people.
I think that's about all the time we have. I have one quote from Bill Gates that I want to say, and it will be fodder for the reception, which he said, automation applied to an efficient operation will magnify the efficiency. Automation applied to an inefficient operation will magnify the inefficiency. Let's all ponder that about the U.S. government. Thanks, everybody. Thanks to the panel.
Thank you.